I'm referred to often as an individualist. Well, I plead guilty to that soft impeachment.
Mr. Wright said, "To be an architect is not what someone does, it is what someone is."
The basis of a culture is architecture. We haven't yet woken up to the fact that until we do create an environment which has genuine beauty and character, we have no culture.
My husband was a complex individual. To describe him in any kind of conventional language seems an impossibility.
Just looking at the pictures that I have of him, I think he was a casting director's dream.
He could be stubborn and demanding in his way, but that's why he was able to achieve what he did. He was not easily talked out of an idea once he had it.
He never went after work, as most architects do. He believed that he must be discovered by the client. The client came to him. My name is Edgar Tafel. I am a practicing architect. I became an apprentice in the fall of 1932 to Frank Lloyd Wright at the Taliesin Fellowship in Spring Green, Wisconsin.
My name is Eric Lloyd Wright. My occupation is that of an architect, and I am a grandson of Frank Lloyd Wright. My father was Lloyd Wright. He was the eldest son of Frank Lloyd Wright, and he also was an architect. I worked with my grandfather on several projects. Of course, I did a lot of work in construction at Taliesin also. I was there as an apprentice from 1948 to 1956.
I'm Pedro Guerrero. I like to consider myself an architectural photographer. I went to Taliesin in 1940 and was hired by Mr. Wright to take photographs. And after that, there wasn't a single door that I came to that wasn't opened by just mentioning the name and showing the fact that I had been with Frank Lloyd Wright.
There are many reasons that my grandfather created the Taliesin Fellowship. One of the reasons was, of course, that he was out of money, out of work, and trying to find out a way that he could get work done without having to pay for professional draftsmen. Because, of course, this was in the height of the Depression, 1932. He also had this element of being the preacher and the teacher. He really had a message that he wanted to get out to not only architects, but to the people of the United States on how to live, how to create a society.
So he was training us to be organic architects. First, we would work in the garden, in the fields, on the construction, and in the drafting room to become good draftsmen.
In many cases, people would spend a whole year in the kitchen without ever touching a pencil.
In 1920, 35-year-old Edgar J. Kaufmann was made president of his family's department store in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, one of the largest stores between New York and Chicago. Under E.J.'s direction, Kaufmann's store moved in new and progressive directions. Dedicated to the idea of incorporating the arts in industry, in 1926, he held an international exposition of arts throughout the store. The 100 foreign exhibits drew capacity crowds.
The Pittsburgh Press. There was something in Edgar Kaufmann, a magnetic personality that made him attractive. He was a stocky man with dark wavy hair and excellently modulated voice. He frequently attended musical events and art shows. His personal collection of paintings was one of the nation's finest.
They were very warm personalities. And they had quite a following of friends and artists, all kinds of people. Sr. was a very charming, intelligent, winning personality. People just adored him as far as I could tell.
In 1930, my father and architect Benno Jansen planned a grand remodeling of the ground floor of the family's department store. This was carried out in bold Art Deco, black glass columns, and murals depicting a history of trade painted by Boardman Robinson. A friend recommended Frank Lloyd Wright's An Autobiography. I went out to Spring Green, Wisconsin. Though I had no plan to become an architect, Wright agreed to let me join the Taliesin Fellowship in October of 1934. Soon my parents came to visit. They were moved by the extraordinary beauty of Wright's home and its landscape, and impressed by the devoted enthusiasm of the apprentices. Wright and my father were both outgoing, winning, venturesome men, and father quickly felt the power of Wright's genius. Before the year's end, Wright stopped off in Pittsburgh to discuss several projects with my parents. One was a country house. Father and Wright drove to the mountain property to consider a site. This was Wright's first view of our forested land with its waterfall. He saw a great opportunity for architecture. Here would stand Fallingwater.
The commission for Fallingwater and for Kaufmann's office was a great boost, stimulus for the fellowship. One of the main things it did, of course, was to really begin to bring to the forefront my grandfather's work again. He had been down and out, almost out for the count, all through the 1920s. Very little work had been done. At the time he formed the fellowship in 1932, there were no jobs in the office. And then came Fallingwater. Fallingwater was so unique and so spectacular that it really caught the public's imagination. He was again in the forefront of American architecture.
Fallingwater is famous. In 1936, before it was even finished, knowledgeable people talked about this new work of Frank Lloyd Wright's. It upset the experts' opinion that the contentious old American architect, he was then nearing 70, had nothing of value to add to his achievements. In fact, this house announced an entire new quarter century of Wright's creativity.
It is understandable why Mr. Wright came onto the scene in this creative way with the house, and then Kaufmann would want to have that kind of spirit and that kind of artistry in his everyday being in an office.
To Edgar J. Kaufmann's department store, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My dear E.J., we're laying out your office and furniture now, and we're starting on the home at Bear Run, an especially difficult project.
At Taliesin in the drafting room, Mr. Wright would walk in, and in the morning he always said, "Gut Morgen." And then we all would stand up out of deference, and he would walk around from one table to another. When he saw something that he thought needed his attention, he would just sit down, and the apprentice would be beside him so that you could feed him with sharpened pencils as he worked. Because he worked furiously. He couldn't get an idea, and the pencils would break. He'd press down on them too hard. So you'd have to have everything ready for him. And it was as if he were a surgeon, and you would give him all these surgical instruments. When he designed talking about the people he was designing for. Well, I remember when he was working on the plans for the Fallingwater, he would say, "This is where E.J. and Lillian would walk across the bridge and go up for a picnic beyond the house. This is where they will sit around the fireplace."
Dear Mr. Wright, this letter no doubt will reach you back in Taliesin. I thoroughly enjoyed the few days you were with us. You were always extremely stimulating to me, and I am looking forward to when we might see each other again. Greetings to your family and the fellowship. Sincerely, E.J.
I think on the whole, he had a very good relationship with clients, I think better than most architects. The people that came to him, they came to him because they wanted the kind of architecture that he was developing. And to be interested in that form of architecture, they had to be special people themselves. There's no question in my mind that Mr. Kaufmann had a really perceptive view of my grandfather and was one of those creative clients. You couldn't have created Fallingwater without Edgar Kaufmann. It couldn't be just done by Frank Lloyd Wright alone. So there was something in Edgar Kaufmann that stimulated my grandfather to create that work of art.
Mr. Wright had a great feeling toward E.J. Kaufmann. He called him E.J. Kaufmann was a businessman. Mr. Wright had a great affinity towards businessmen. He had a lot of worriment about people in academia, lawyers, real estate people. These were parasites to him. But a businessman was a doer. Kaufmann fell into that category.
My dear E.J., I have never corrected your letter of July 5th concerning the arrangement for fees. The fee for the office was 20% of cost complete, including furniture, 5% for preliminary sketches. Assumed cost of
One
office
weakness, I think, was that he never blocked out how to get compensation for his work. I always felt that he only sent bills when he was broke and needed money badly. Then he'd send out a batch of bills, sometimes with an attached letter that was unkindly, as if that man knew how much money was due to the architect at the time. These fights about money, they should never have happened.
Dear Mr. Wright, your estimate of $6,000 for the office and furniture appears rather high, although we never discussed the total amount. However, the actual cost will speak for itself. How are you getting along with the shop drawings and details, so we might start building the early part of the year? While I am writing, I have a yearning to be with you for several days up in the workshop to pore over the plans and to discuss matters with you in person. Do you think you're far enough along to tolerate us for a day or two, or would you rather have us wait? Sincerely, Edgar.
Dear E.J., we're giving you our very best and hope it won't be just too damn good to happen.
He was wanting to do the best he possibly could do for the client. He would want to make it so beautiful and so gorgeous that very often it got so expensive that the client couldn't afford it.
The supervising carpenter for the construction of Kaufmann's office was Manuel Sandoval. In 1932, 4 years prior to the construction of the office, Sandoval first made contact with Wright as an applicant to the Taliesin Fellowship.
To Mr. Frank Lloyd Wright, eager to join Colony, am expert carpenter, have studied architecture at home and read your inspiring autobiography. I'm very much in earnest. Age 35. Let me come. Please write or wire collect. Manuel J. Sandoval. My dear Mr. Wright, I was very glad to receive your kind letter. I would take care of this Pittsburgh work of the Kaufmann office, but would appreciate your sending particulars about the job. I shall be most grateful for the further details. I want to do a piece of work that you will be proud of. Respectfully yours, Manuel J. Sandoval.
Manuel Sandoval, he was a fantastic woodworker, and he was a Nicaraguan. He could do such beautiful work. It was unbelievable. He was a perfectionist. Mr. Wright immediately saw his capabilities as a craftsman and set up a shop where Manuel would do everything.
As one of the apprentices supervising construction of Fallingwater, Bob Mosier wrote to Frank Lloyd Wright with progress on the house and Kaufmann's office. He said,
As the work progresses, the Kaufmanns are becoming all the more enthused and spend a good deal of time here in order to see the work. And when the work is over, the procedure is to talk continuously over everything. E.J. pores over everything with a good deal of precision. He knows every inch of the plans and of everything that takes place concerning them. Mr. Kaufmann has talked a good deal about the office. He seems anxious to have it. He likes to pictorialize his routine within the room, and the one thing he cannot visualize is the effect of the mural. I've talked and explained in great shape, and still he comes back for more. He would like another one of your colored pencil drawings. I'd like to see it too. I hope this has not all been boring. Sincerely yours, Bob.
Instead of having just a bare wall, let's take care of that whole wall. That whole wall becomes a symphony, very quiet, in wood, a mural in wood, an abstract mural. And you're not looking as you're working all day at objects, paintings of scenes.
You can't be familiar with the process of nature without some love and understanding of pattern. Because everywhere, nature is indulging in pattern.
Materials were not to be disguised. Wood was to be wood, metal was to be metal. And using the material, enhancing it only by not disguising it in any way with paint.
All through this dictation, my mind has been on a plan, which may or may not appeal to you. A little quiet, sunshine, and sea air should be just the ticket. Why not arrange it in the next few weeks to come visit us while we're on vacation here in Florida? We have plenty of room. I promise to even avoid discussing the house, excepting at such times when you care to. Have you ever been here? All in all?
Mr. Wright, as often as he could, and I think most times he succeeded in designing the entire environment. He wanted absolute full reign to design everything that went into it. Furniture, light fixtures, everything.
Mr. Wright had some problems with furniture because it came out first of the drafting board. And so much of his furniture is linear and at right angles as you draw. There are only a few pieces of the freestanding furniture that he designed that the human body fits well. And he used to say, I've been black and blue all my life, bumping into my own furniture.
The office rugs and fabrics covering the chairs and stools were woven by lawyer Saarinen. Saarinen was a Finnish textile designer, director of the weaving workshop at the Cranbrook Academy, and wife of the architect Eliel Saarinen.
Dear Eliel, herewith are the designs for the weaving for the Kaufmann office. If you will kindly explain them to Mrs. Saarinen and send me the price you think's reasonable, I will submit it to EJ for approval. We want only a very good, substantial fabric, all wool. The pattern of the weaving varied, as seems in the nature of the making. She will know how to do it, I am sure. The yellow is the yellow of the jacket she was wearing, and that I mentioned as just the color. The only other color is the natural wool.
The closer you were to him, the greater his expectations of what you could do were. He would always blow up at people who are really close around him, and he could be very, very harsh on people. Still, there were those tremendous rewards. The older I got, the more I began to appreciate him.
Dear Sandy, I've returned from Pittsburgh. The chair has come back to Taliesin for some changes. One door is cut so short you can see under it. Otherwise, the work seems good. I find you were paid $2,000 more for your labor than you assured me it would cost. The materials cost more than twice your original estimate of $800, etc., etc. The result is that I shall owe
Dear
Kaufmann
Mr. Wright,
about $250.
I received your letter. So far as the Kaufmann job is concerned, I feel that it was well done. I am a very particular person myself. I am proud of the work. I not only wish to turn out a job that would be a credit to my own name, but also one that Taliesin would always be proud of. Undoubtedly, it could have been slapped together in less time, but that is not my way. I finished everything before I left to Mr. Kaufmann's entire satisfaction. I shall be glad to hear from you. Respectfully, Manuel J. Sandoval.
Dear Sandy, You were not working for Mr. Kaufmann, and you had no contract with him. You were working for me and the fellowship. If this fact is beyond your understanding, I will explain it to you when I see you, which better be pretty soon. I want the big check corrected right away. Your attitude toward Taliesin, instead of a loyal apprentice, seems to be already that of the cash-and-carry exploiter. You evidently forgot how you got to be an expert in Frank Lloyd Wright, not to mention the opportunity to do an important piece of work to the credit of your own name, and get a lot of money for doing it at Kaufmann's. But get this, Sandy. I want those chairs fixed without delay.
What would get my grandfather into tempers, into furies, was if things were not going the way he wanted them to, obviously. Instructions weren't being followed, or the concept wasn't going through, or he felt people weren't listening to what he was trying to say. That would really irritate and really get him going. He could really blow up and just go through a real tirade about something and just leave everybody devastated.
Once he blasted you, that was finished, and then we go on to the next phases. So very often people would think just because he blasted somebody and wrote him a real nasty letter, well, that was the end forever. But it wasn't a question of forgiveness. He would forget rather than forgive. Mr. Wright always said kind and warm things about Mr. Kaufmann. They became very, very close as two men who had shared experience. After the war, Kaufmann got interested in Mr. Wright's doing a big master plan for Pittsburgh.
For another half-dozen years after Fallingwater, I saw Father commission a series of designs from Frank Lloyd Wright. There were plans for changes and additions to Fallingwater, none essential, none executed, nor were any of the grandiose projects for Pittsburgh Wright designed for Father. This was perhaps inevitable, since Father was steadily growing more self-preoccupied, and Wright was eager to construct great designs at the culmination of his long career.
I think the reason that the projects that Edgar Kaufmann had my grandfather design in the 50s for the city of Pittsburgh didn't go forward is because of politics. Well, this was a huge project. I mean, it was taking in a huge bridge to span the river and a whole civic center complex and parking structure and apartment buildings. And they said, well, it's just too much. We can't afford to do that. Even though they weren't built, they were theoretically wonderful projects.
Dear E.J., now that, against my will and wish and understanding, I am being paid off, I want to say some things that crowd on my mind. I realize that we will never build anything more together, which is a genuine sorrow to me, for I conceived a love for you quite beyond the ordinary relationship of client and architect. That love gave you Fallingwater. You will never have anything more in your life like it, because you seem to have changed greatly inside since then. There was a fire and courage in you that was trustworthy and could do great things, I felt. Then you proceeded to waste it, like a fool. Too many adverse advisors, either ignorant or insincere, not sure of yourself. You are a fool for only short intervals, Edgar. When you are yourself, you are the dearest and sweetest man alive, as Lillian and Junior and I well know. Affection, Frank Lloyd Wright.
Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Saturday, April 16, 1955. Edgar J. Kaufmann, merchant prince and pioneer planner of Pittsburgh's cultural redevelopment, died peacefully in his sleep yesterday at his Palm Springs, California home. He was 69. On Thursday night, Mr. Kaufmann was in good spirits as he and his family entertained famed architect Frank Lloyd Wright. Besides being one of the most outstanding merchants of this era, he was a liberal contributor to the arts and a man of great vision.
I do not consider myself a success. I feel rather that I am a brilliant failure, because as yet, The United States has no organic architecture, and I believe that a nation cannot have a culture of its own until it has an architecture of its own. Who knows who is a success until long after the circumstances. So 50 years from now, you will know whether or not I am a successful person.
My grandfather's work was very much ahead of its time. In fact, I think we're still trying to catch up to him. He was ahead of his time in the ways not only of his buildings, but in the way of life. And we're beginning to realize that we're just coming around to where his thinking was. And I think that that's why he's becoming so popular now.
The fact is that he really did touch my life and continues to. I thought he was immortal. I think he thought he was too. I don't think that he ever expected to die. And certainly I didn't expect him to die and that I would miss him so much, but I do. He was, to me, the complete mentor. And I miss him.
If he walked into a room, if he walked into this room right now and it were crowded with people, suddenly there would be a feeling of electricity. Something happened. And the voices all get down and people turn. He was a very attractive person. And he dressed beautifully. And all his spoken words were with authority. And even when he was being funny or telling a story, he stood for something. And it's something you couldn't fool around with.
October 25th, 1937. E.J., you got your money's worth out of an architect, if ever a man did, and probably for the first time in your life. Sincerely yours, Frank Lloyd Wright.